Yeah, basic human rights.
People just do not think about the fact that if you're going to do that, you're going to be doing that forever if you want to do this full time.
Let's be honest, sometimes we're treated like shit, like big cons. And like, we will take it because we need the money.
If you are going to be a crochet artist in Artist Alley, I think it's really, really important for you to try and have your own designs.
Before your first US con, in that case, Kawaii Con last year, what exactly did you need to do to be able to vend in the US? Hello, everyone, and welcome to season 3 of the Creative Confessions, and we're celebrating our 1-year anniversary. Woo! In this pod, we talk about all things Artist Alley, manufacturing products as an artist, and small business advice. I'm your host, Macy, and I'm the artist and designer behind Mualcaina, a small business focused on kawaii designs. So some of the most popular and profitable anime conventions are in the United States, so it's not a surprise that Artist Alley applicants are not limited to those residing in the US. I'm excited to welcome our next guest, who is well known in the floral crochet space and a fellow Artist Alley vlogger who can offer her perspective vending in numerous reputable US cons as a Canadian. Without further ado, I'm excited to welcome Tina, better known as Made with April. Yay! Hello. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I'd love to start out if you could share a little bit about yourself and how you started Made with April.
I'm Tina. April is actually my dog's name, but I started Made with April, I think it's been 2 years now. I was picked up crocheting during COVID, and then it kind of just slowly spiraled out of control. And after I tried a couple local like craft fairs, farmers markets type things, then it really spiraled out of control. And here we are.
Wow. So before Made with April, what did you do before you started your business?
Before I started it, I was actually working as a radiation therapist. It's kind of like an X-ray technician. I work at like hospitals and cancer centers, but imagine like super, super strong X-rays that are used primarily to treat cancer. It was a pretty good job with like standard shift work, 30 a.m. to 3 p.m., like 9 to 5. But it was something that I pursued for my parents and not for myself, so it ultimately led to me being super burnt out.
And do you currently run your business full time right now?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And as of now, are you doing everything yourself with crocheting, fulfillment, social media, editing content, and whatnot?
Maybe 95% of it is myself. Sometimes I have friends that I definitely don't force to volunteer to help me a little bit, just with like small tedious things like wrapping the stems of the flowers or like sorting stuff, sorting like yarn when I get big shipments in. But like social media, fulfillments, everything, editing, content is all me.
And some of our listeners may be familiar with you and your work since you also vlog at conventions, as well as like studio work and create small business content. When did you first start vending at cons?
I did my first con in 2023. I think it was like nearing the end of the year, maybe like September, October. And then I did one other con. So I only did 2 cons in 2023, and then I kind of went ham in 2024.
And since starting in 2023, how many cons have you done since you first started?
There were the 2 in 2023, and then there were 12 in 2024. So I've done 15 in total because I've done one this year now.
Okay. Oh my gosh. Because I feel like when I see you on social media, you're always doing another convention. And I'm like, well, how is this girl doing this with all of like the crochet?
I successfully recorded like every single one. There's like a couple small local things that I've done, even if it's just like a little 4-hour event or a pop-up or something. But I try to have like the same amount of content just to like maximize content no matter
Yeah.
what kind of show it
It's
is.
like you get it. And out of all the conventions, which one would you say was your most successful?
I think financially, my most successful convention was Anime Central. That's the one in Chicago. But I personally consider KawaiiCon in Hawaii to be my most successful
Mm.
one. It was financially not great, actually. I like barely broke even because it was my first US con and I planned really poorly. And also, Hawaii is just known to be really, really expensive. And I didn't really think about it. I didn't plan well for that. But I get like the most consistent online orders and like interaction with people on social media and just like really good follow-up after that convention from the very kind people of
Oh,
Hawaii.
wow. That's good. I like that you brought up measuring success in that way as well, because naturally, as someone who runs a business, you kind of gear towards, did I get a lot of monetary reward from this particular event? But I don't think people
Hmm.
also consider, even after the event, like you said, you did decently well, like with social media or with future customers from that location. And I think that's a good way to consider that perspective as well in terms of success for a convention. Now that you have that experience, what's something that you would do different for this year's KawaiiCon? I suppose besides bringing more product.
Definitely just doing everything earlier. Like, but I've already booked like hotels, flights, sharing hotels to split costs, shipping everything earlier. Because I can only make so much stock so fast. But I try to prep really early since nearing the end of the year last year, I had kind of a lull and I didn't really have that much going on. So I over prepped and then I brought some stuff when I went to ALA to my friend's place, and they're gonna help me bring it to
Oh,
KawaiiCon,
okay.
which will save me a lot of
No, I
money.
bet. It's like it's a lot closer versus shipping from Canada. Oh my gosh. So, as I mentioned, and since you're currently residing in Canada, you've done a good amount of conventions in the United States and would be considered an international artist in the context of this conversation. We do have a lot of international listeners who are interested in vending here in the States, and we're curious about the logistics of doing that, since I heard some may need to obtain like a visa or ship out product a certain amount of time prior due to customs. Before your first US con, in that case, Kauai Con last year, what exactly did you need to do to be able to vend in the US?
So I'm hesitant to provide like a super thorough answer because it's so different for every person. The US is also extra complicated because every state has its own rules, which is something I didn't know before I did it. But there's like a different sales permit or like tax something depending on where you're going. It depends on what kind of business you have. For example, if you have like a sole proprietorship versus an incorporation, versus if you're not even an official business, you're just you, how often you're planning to travel there, how much you think you'll make. There's like a lot of really hard questions that are really hard to answer because you haven't done it yet. Ultimately, I would recommend people to talk to a professional. You should talk to an accountant. You should talk to a lawyer. Give them all the information about like your business, how much you make, often you want to go. Obviously, it's going to be different if you're like, oh, I just want to try it one time and see what happens. But be prepared for it to be a process. Like it's going to be a pretty long process. It's going to cost a pretty chunk of change, and it's not going to be that easy. But there are people that do it and kind of don't go through the process. They'll bring everything in suitcases and they will tell customs that they're going on
Oh my
vacation
gosh.
and go to the con and come back and not do anything. Like, obviously, I can't recommend that. I've seen people that do it, and sometimes I'm like, oh man, I would have saved so much money if I just lie. I do know people that have been stopped at customs and got rejected. They got pulled into secondary, their luggage was searched. They didn't have the required permits or forms or the whole list of stuff that you need. I think it's been over 2 years now, but for 2 years after that, every time they tried to go to the US, they would get pulled into secondary, which it can take like 3 to 4 hours every single
Oh
time.
my gosh.
Basically, after that happens, they first of all they were out all the expenses of that con. That's like a whole chunk of change. They also pretty much could never do that again to the US for the rest of next year and a half, because if they got caught doing it again, they would be fined again because they were fined, and then they have like a little it's like a little poster with like their mugshot and like their
Oh my god, that's
fingerprint.
crazy.
It's like really bad. It's not for me. My mental state is very weak. I cannot do that
Oh
kind of
yeah,
stuff.
no. Just for anyone listening, we are not legal or financial professionals. This is for entertainment purposes only. Just so everyone knows, please go to a legal or financial professional in this case. And we do not recommend doing illegal means at all.
I don't recommend it. I don't recommend it.
And in that case, since you did bring up, let's say, like if someone wanted to go through the proper means of obtaining everything they need to vend in the US legally, would you recommend that they do that as soon as they can or as soon as they receive an acceptance for like a convention?
I would just do it as soon as you
Okay.
can. For some people, it's gonna be not worth it if you're only planning to do like one or two shows. Never mind like what you get into, because that's like a
Mhm.
whole other can of worms. Like it's impossible now. But you want to kind of at least know approximately how much it's gonna cost and like how long it's gonna take going into it. You don't want to risk you might get into something and then you go through the whole process, but it doesn't happen fast enough, and then you can't do it in the end.
Yeah. I know it depends on the person and the business and a lot of factors. But from your experience and with your business, how long did it take from when you were, I would say, like reaching out to professionals versus when you got approved with everything?
It's hard to say because it's like a
Mm.
multi-step process, and I kind of did like a little bit of it and then a little bit of it like way later because I wasn't sure how committed I was. Maybe half a
Okay.
year-ish, just on and off trying to go through the process.
Okay.
You can do it much faster than that.
Mm.
I just like getting
That's fair.
scared and then not doing
I
it.
kind of assumed that it was like that long of a process. I mean, I guess, like you said, it could be a bit shorter, but I would assume that it takes like several months. I wouldn't expect, like, oh yeah, immediately 1 month later, I'm in the US, like vending.
I think I was pretty lucky too. My city's pretty small. I'm sure if you live somewhere like really high population like Toronto, like just every kind of document and legal thing takes 7 times longer there. So
Uh,
there's that too.
I can see that. Did you face any challenges crossing like the US Canadian border with your products? I know some people also like who are coming from the US going back to Canada or going to a Canadian convention usually have that issue.
If you have all your stuff, paper stuff, you're good.
Okay. How do you handle payment systems when vending in the US?
It's gonna depend on which paperwork process you did. I have like suggested stuff before and then somebody tried it and then it didn't work for them. So I'm hesitant to like, oh, just use this. It's easy and it works. I can say if you don't do anything and you come over with your Canadian like Square account, that's not gonna work
Okay.
because all the Square terminals and like accounts and stuff are region locked. Yeah, it'll depend on like what kind of bank account you have. Like there's like US, Canadian bank account. Ask your accountant.
Good to know. I don't know if I've experienced it with Canadian artists, but I know with other international artists who come to the US, especially at AX, I know for a lot of them, which does put them at a disadvantage considering how the US is so credit card based in terms of shopping, is that some of them
Mm.
just accept cash, which is another option, but then it's really complicated because now you're like blocking out people who want to pay with card.
There's also a limit to how much cash you can bring over the border.
Mm.
If you're just traveling as like a civilian, I don't know, like
Hmm.
a regular person, somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 that you can bring over the border. And then anything over that, you have to declare it. And then I don't know what happens if you don't
Okay.
declare it. You have
I
to
know I've
like
always
pay
been curious.
extra or something. I don't know.
So, how do you choose which US conventions to attend?
Honestly, I try to just go where I know people because then I can save a lot of money on hotel or if they have a car, like Uber and like all of that. Or if it's somewhere that I really want to go, Hawaii, I don't know anyone that lives in Hawaii. I just really wanted to go there. If I can split it with friends or something like that, I'll try to go to those types of cons.
Did you also, I'm assuming you also based it off of if you can profit really well compared to just any small
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
What challenges do you face at US conventions compared to Canadian ones?
Other than like the whole initial process, everything being in USD is a
Mm.
challenge for me. Like when I go to like a coffee place and I'm like, oh, coffee's only $5. And then it's actually like 7.50 or something Canadian. And I'm like, oh my God. Although making USD is also a positive point of that.
That's what I've heard. It's like it's very expensive here, but the amount you can make with that conversion is pretty great. If a non American wants to vend in the US, what would you recommend they do?
Make an appointment with your lawyer and accountant. Do that first. I also know so many people that like their business isn't even a real business yet. Do that first. Your taxes are like so whack if you don't
Yeah.
do that.
I That's so scary. I feel like it's one thing to just do that, but then if it's your local event, which let's be honest, sometimes they don't care. But if you're going to travel to like another
Mm-mm.
country and you're doing that, like that's terrifying.
So I don't know if it's because I'm like older, but I feel like a lot of young people that I talk to aren't thinking about things like buying housing or like building credit. And you need like some kind of financial track record that isn't just I made this much in cash in order to do those things.
As an artist, how do you decide if a con is worth vending at again if the revenue wasn't amazing?
The location, if it's somewhere that I want to go again, if I have friends that are there that I want to visit again, if I can like double dip for any other purpose. If the attendees were really nice, I don't make as many sales, but then I get a lot of follow up in my online store. So I kind of have to think about that revenue difference as well. This hasn't really happened for me, but I've heard for some people like networking opportunities. Sometimes when people go to some shows, they'll be approached by like consignment stores. I got approached by a publisher once that
Ooh.
wanted to write a book of my patterns, but like I just don't have time for that. I don't love writing patterns. So I never followed up with it, but I guess like that kind of thing is
Mm.
also a benefit.
Is there anything you would do differently if you could start Artist Alley over again?
I don't know if I got lucky. I think I did pretty good for just like 1 year so far. I think the thing I did best was just consume all the content. If people make it available, then you should take advantage of that information. Obviously, it's different for everyone, but the more you know, the better you're able to make an informed decision. There are some things, like mistakes and things that I made because I didn't quite do enough research, like not preparing early enough, not knowing the audience of the convention.
Looking back on what you've done with conventions and how your business is running, I would say you're pretty successful, at least from what I see. And I think it's great that you also just jumped in like naturally. I think for the other end, for a lot of people, they like to do a ton of research, but then they never actually execute what they want to do. Like you said, like doing the research, but then actually following up with what you want to do is really the best solution. It's like you don't want to just keep researching and then
Mhm.
you're still researching and you haven't done at least one event. So you run a crochet business, primarily focusing on crocheted floral products. Do you crochet your products yourself?
Yes, they are all made by me. Right now, 90% of the designs are my own as well.
What's your most simple crochet product and what's your most complicated?
My most simple one is my lavender. They take about 10 to 12 minutes to
Oh,
make. I don't know, depending on my mood or like just how I'm feeling that day. I try to time it because it helps me price things. The more complicated ones are probably anywhere from like an hour to
okay.
two. It doesn't take me that long to crochet. It's more just like the assembly of it. Spider lilies with like a bunch of appendages or like cherry blossoms with a bunch of branches. It takes me forever to put it together and like glue everything.
Okay. And how do you balance the time consuming nature of crocheting with the need to produce enough inventory for conventions? Because I can imagine, like, especially since you're manually putting things together, like, I can just design something, order, and I'm done. But then for you, it's very much dependent on how fast you are.
I am pretty fast, but to be honest, I don't know if there's that much balance sometimes. It's my full-time job, so I see it as that, and I just kind of like clock in and out every day. I like come to my desk, turn my brain off, have a set number of things that I want to make. I think that's why expenses are more important to me because since I can't just reorder product, a lot of work goes into just making expenses back. For me, those hours are kind of wasted when I could potentially be selling that product like online and not having to pay travel fees or hotel, all of the expenses that come with going to a convention. I do try to do not a billion conventions so that I'm not making so much product just to spend it on expenses.
How do you determine pricing for your crochet goods?
It's a combination of time taken and then cost of materials. And then sometimes if I just like hate making it, I'll just make it a little bit more expensive.
That's a valid pricing strategy. How do you prepare for a con with this type of business? Because, like you said, you have to prepare like a lot of them in advance, and then I can imagine like the worst thing that could happen is that you sell out very early on in the con.
That has happened to me. Everything has to be made super in advance. If I have to ship it or anything, then it has to be made even more in advance to account for shipping times and all of that. I think over the past 2 years, I've built up like a pretty good amount of stock that I don't have to worry as much, especially about the more simple designs. I have like a calendar, do this one, this one, this one, and then every once in a while, I'll like go and check my inventory and see what I have and just make more of whatever I don't have. The good side of it is that if I ever sell out of something, not while I'm at a con, but like at home, I can just immediately make some more.
So for ASIN, how far in advance did you start preparing for that?
I'd reached the point where I was already okay on a lot of things. I'm really bad at inventory. It's like sometimes I'll make a bunch of stuff and it's a mess. It's such a mess. And I'll like put it somewhere and I'll forget that I have it. And then I'll just find it later and like I don't remember when I made this. One time I had a big box of those giant storage containers and I had yarn on top and I used up all the yarn and I realized I had been stocking like roses under there for I don't know how long. And I was like, oh, free labor, I guess. I don't have like a okay, at this date, I'm gonna start prepping for this con that's 2 months away. It's kind of just I'm perpetually prepping.
Okay. I feel like that's also the best situation because then you can prepare yourself like just in case. Or at least, I guess another question too, not
Yeah, yeah.
convention related. I'm assuming Valentine's Day is like one of your like biggest for sales or not so much?
It's hard to say for
Hmm.
cons because it just depends on when the con is. But looking at online sales, my biggest is actually May, like Mother's
Oh,
Day.
okay.
And then Valentine's Day was second.
Okay.
But it was like a pretty stark difference. I was very surprised.
I'm like going further and further away from like the con topic. But for Mother's Day, since that's your most popular online, do you prep for
Yeah.
that as well, or you just again perpetually continue making things?
I have my basic set of like designs that I want to keep as like a
Mm.
standard in the store. Those I would say are perpetually prepped. And then I have a second category of new designs or like character designs for cons or like any Mother's Day Eve flowers. And I'll try to prep those maybe a month in advance.
Okay, got it. I'm like, I'm just curious. I'm like, I don't know how people like crochet things because I'm like, dang, that's so much work. Because personally, for me, I had like another business. I used to make like Disney ears. I hated the process of like manually making things, which is why I outsource everything. I'm like, I will design it, but someone else has to make it. I do not want to touch anything where I have to like make something myself.
That's so valid. It's not for everyone. It's definitely not for everyone.
How many of each product do you bring to conventions? I know you have like a lot of designs, but you can share like the typical quantity for like your least popular, most
Mm.
popular, and then for usual like mid-sized cons and then big cons like Otakon and ASIN.
Going back to the point that I'm like so bad at inventory, it honestly varies so much. Like I could bring 20 of something one time and then 5 of something the next time, even though it's a bigger show. Honestly, sometimes I'm like, I just can't bring myself to make this. Like I really just do not want to make these right now. Sometimes if I notice that I accidentally have just made a billion sunflowers, I'll just like, okay, I guess I'm bringing more sunflowers because I have too many of these and it doesn't make sense. I don't even know how many I bring
That's
sometimes.
okay. That's me with like all of my products. Let's be honest. I'm like, I'm gonna put a bunch of Luffy pins. I think that's enough. Yeah, I should also be more.
Yeah, my measurements are like, like a handful of this and like a handful of that.
But like, do you also just base it, I guess, in the back of your head of like which one you think is like most popular, or it's also just this feels right?
I think it's actually more like a lot of the time the popular thing I won't bring enough because I won't have time to stock it from like the event before. Because usually if it's popular, I'm always low on it. I try to bring at least like 1 or 3 of like everything at least.
Okay, so three minimum.
And then everything else just depends.
Okay.
Yeah, 3 minimum.
If you remember, like, what's the max of like something that you've brought?
Like like this
Okay.
many. If I'm holding them all, it would be like
So in that case, like, how do you store your products when you travel to conventions? And I assume like we can talk about like flying since you fly to most of your events.
I've been shipping stuff to US conventions because it's easier for me. If I fly like within Canada, I can just pack it all in a suitcase.
Oh, okay.
And they're very durable. A lot of the ones that have like weird appendages, I just flatten them out and then I fold them out when I get to the event.
Okay.
So even when I put them in boxes, I'll put like paper or something around in case the box gets wet and like a sheet of plastic. If they get like damaged, I just bring it back and then I fix it and I can bring it to a different show.
That is so nice. That's so convenient. Since you mentioned that you also ship products to cons ahead of time, the lowest you've been into the US in terms of like distance, LA area, how far in advance did you ship product to LA?
Because I ship it to my
Mm.
friend's place, so I don't have to worry about this many days before the convention. I have to ship it out whenever I have filled a
Oh, okay.
box.
Oh, perfect.
Honestly, I only ever ship to a friend's place, or I have a bunch of local friends that do cons as
Mm.
well, and they do international shows as well. And I will just be like, hey, let me know when you're shipping out that box and we can split the shipping. I'll
Oh,
just like throw my stuff in. It's easier because I'm perpetually planning for me to just go with their schedule. So whenever they're gonna ship something out, here's what I have on this day, here's what I'll put in.
I don't know why I did not think to ship with other people. I'm like, oh, like if I can share a hotel,
Yeah.
I didn't even think to like ship with another person. That's so smart.
Saves a lot of money. Saves a lot of
No, I
money.
bet.
At ALA, I think too, I had like a huge box and someone was like, "Oh my God, you have so much stuff." And I was like, "Oh no, this isn't good."
It's like I'm just sharing like this part of the box.
Because my stuff is pretty durable too. I am the designated padding
Mm,
for some of their more fragile
that
stuff.
is that's so smart. That, oh my God, that That changed my life. Do you find that there's a difference between vending at smaller local like cons or events versus the larger ones?
To be honest, I prefer the smaller cons because I feel like there's more time to chat with attendees. Everyone's like a little bit more personable. I do find that often you get treated a lot better by like staff as an artist at like a smaller con. The first con I ever went to alone was a really small one in Victoria, BC called SukinoCon. I think they have like 50 to 60 vendors and artists
Oh, wow.
together. And it's at like a university and they provided water, they provided food, snacks, they like constantly check up on you. Obviously, sales wise, there's going to be a difference, but I think with my product type, because it's such a process to pick flowers sometimes and I'm able to talk more with people, obviously, you still make more at a con like ASIN than like a small con like that. There's pros and cons.
When you brought up like, oh yeah, they'll give you water, they'll care for you. I'm like, yeah, basic human rights. I'm like, I wish every con does that. But I do understand. I know.
Bar is
Yeah, the
low.
bar is so low. Because yeah, like with bigger cons, which naturally sure will make more in revenue. Let's be honest, sometimes we're treated like shit. Like big cons. And like we will take it because we need the money. But yeah, sometimes it's nice
Mm.
when the smaller events actually have the time and care to put into the vendors. Do you notice any trends in crochet products that are gaining popularity at cons?
Most crochet is still plushy. I have noticed like some artists that like mainly print digital art artists have started adding like maybe a couple crochet plushies or crochet things here and there to divvy up their product selection. Because there's not as many crocheters at cons, there isn't a lot of drive for there to be variety like there is with digital art. You guys are always coming up with like cool product ideas and like new types of things because of the competition that drives that. Whereas for crochet, there isn't as much of, oh, I need to be really different. Because by being a crochet artist and a handmade artist, you're already kind of different.
Yeah, I can see that. I have seen a few print artists who have some like crochet goods on their table. And like you said, it's like usually crochet plushies. I think with the nature of Artist Alley as well, it's more popular with craft markets. But even within Artist Alley, I think if you have like crocheted goods and the fact that you have specific crochet floral items, you're the only person I can think of when it comes to that, besides the resellers, which we will talk about in a little bit. Um, anyway, you've talked about how this business has had a toll on you, especially I remember seeing like your Instagram post where you were de-influencing others from starting a crochet business. And speaking from experience, I've also had instances where I sometimes feel like I want to quit just because it feels helpless and the economy sucks right now. But I wouldn't want to do anything besides what I'm doing right now. What are some of the things you've done to lessen the burdens of running a small business, particularly one that revolves around handmade crochet goods?
The biggest change that I made that really made a difference was in the first half a year or so of doing my business. This was like actually before I even started doing cons. I was still doing like craft fairs and farmers markets and like just like local cute markets. I almost doubled my prices at one point because I was trying to be just like competitive, make a product available for everyone to purchase, and it was really like burning me out so fast. So I increased my prices like crazy in the first like half a year that I started. I've been kind of padding my income with things that aren't handmade where I can. I do decently off my digital patterns, which are for people who don't crochet. Basically just a set of instructions and pictures and tools, just stuff that you need to make whatever type of flower it is. It's a digital file, so it's kind of like passive income. I make it once and then I can sell it online. Well, I've already been selling like my own. I made a line of yarn. So I've been working on that and I'm hoping to eventually reach like wholesalers, things that aren't handmade to pad it.
The yarn aspect like blew my mind. I remember I have a friend who follows you and she was like, oh my God, she came out with her own yarn. I'm like, yeah, like that's crazy. I was like, that's not something I would have thought. But that was really smart because yeah, like when you have a business like yours where it really is dependent on you and naturally, you know, we're gonna grow older. I mean, I don't know like your plans with your business or like anything, but you know, we can't necessarily like do this forever. Like we get older, we have different responsibilities, like life changes, and it's like sometimes at that point too, like you said, like sometimes you don't feel like crocheting something, but then your business depends on that. So it's good that you diversified with digital goods and yarn. I've also seen some people create kits. I don't know how feasible that is or if that's even something that you've ever considered, like just combining like the yarn
I
and
did
then like the digital.
I've considered it. It's just, it takes up so much
Mm.
space. The yarn, honestly, is already killing me a little bit,
I saw the
but
boxes.
to order like yeah, I didn't think about it. I was just like, okay, I'm gonna have a budget of this much, expect to spend this much, make this much. Worst case scenario, if I can't sell any of it, I'm gonna use it anyway. The thought of having all these little boxes and like putting together all these kits, it's something I've had in the back of my head because in the end, like if I decide I don't want to crochet anymore or God forbid something happens and I can't, it's something that I can always go to. But right now, there's too much happening
Yeah.
already.
No, that's fair. Yeah, I can imagine because just having to keep stock of everything, especially with not knowing what events you get into and then just making sure that you're actually
Mm.
prepared for like the really big events, I can imagine like that just takes up a lot of space and it's like, okay.
See, that's why I don't keep stock. I just kind of eyeball everything. It's so bad. There's like yarn and flowers everywhere. Like I'm not even organized for my yarn versus my flowers. The garage is packed. Our furnace room has like yarn and flowers in it. I think there's like a closet upstairs somewhere. It's a
Oh my
lot.
God. What's something about running a crochet focused business that others might not know?
It's not that others might not know it. Realize that like if you want to run a crochet business, you will literally be crocheting forever. Unless you like, add digital patterns or stuff like that. In the Artist Alley space, it creates this community where everyone is like anyone can try it and do it and have a small business and whatever. And it's the same like when you go into crocheting, for some reason everyone in the community is immediately like, okay, I want to sell it now. I want to start a business now. People just do not think about the fact that if you're going to do that, you're going to be doing that forever if you want to do this full time.
I know for a lot of small business owners, they like having a hand in most, if not all, of the aspects of their business. And actually, I know some people don't want to scale it, but would you ever consider hiring people to help crochet certain goods for you? Or do you want to do it yourself?
The fact that I make it is important to me. I do have friends that help me wrap the yarn around the stem and stuff. And we actually put it in like an electric drill and they just
Oh,
like glue the
wow.
end and then turn the drill on and then glue the other end for me. So there's stuff like that, like it doesn't impact it. Especially with crochet, I can give 5 people the same pattern and they'll all make it and it's not going to
Mm,
come out exactly the same. If I ever stop making it, I wouldn't get someone else to make it. I would just sell something
okay.
else.
No, I think that's fair. I think in the back of my head, or at least way in the beginning, I used to think like, oh, I always have to scale things to a certain point. But like, you don't have to be like a big business. Like, if what you're doing right now is
Mm-mm.
working for you, you don't need to grow bigger. You do not need to. I think even in the past, I used to think like, oh, immediately like work with a warehouse at some point, like hire this many employees. Like, I don't need to do that. Like, if I'm happy with where I am right now and it's working for me, I don't need to
Mhm.
scale. If you want to be the one crocheting everything yourself, like you don't need to hire people to do that. For those wanting to run a crochet based business and vend in Artist Alley, what would you recommend they do?
Similar to anyone that wants to be any kind of artist in Artist Alley or do conventions, learn as much as you can about the process. Try smaller shows first and just go for it and see if you even like it because there is a lot of content online that makes it seem really fun, which it is. But it's not that easy. It's a really different experience. You can't really compare it to any other kind of job. Traveling and setting up and sitting there. It's not like regular hour days. It's like really long. You're often by yourself or you're paying more for someone to help you. Consume a lot of content, learn a lot, do your research, and then try it at a small scale and then try it at a bigger scale.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize that this isn't the typical 9 to 5. If anything, you're working more than a 9 to 5 without the
I did
benefits.
not realize.
It's like no
Yeah.
insurance.
No breaks, by the
Oh my
way.
God. It's like you really have to love your job. I know some people say if you love your job, you'll never work a day in your life. That is not true. There are so many aspects of this business I do not like to do. And I already like doing the social media and content creation. I cannot imagine people who don't even
Mm.
like social media or content creation. Like it's very hard.
If you are going to be a crochet artist in Artist Alley, I think it's really, really important for you to try and have your own designs. You don't necessarily have to be a person that writes patterns, but you should try to be somebody who is able to come up with your own original designs. This isn't the same, but it's like if you bought coloring pages and then colored them in and then you sold that.
Yeah.
Because if you don't make your own design, you're just buying someone else's pattern, making it. You're a maker and you are a crocheter, But I feel like for me, the definition of artist is a little bit different there. Ultimately, it's up to like AA, and to be completely honest, most AA does not care. They don't know about crochet and handmade
Mm.
and like how that all works. But that is also why people always see the same stuff made by crocheters. Like it's always a bee and like an octopus. And I don't know, like
Yeah.
everyone has the same stuff. If more people start to do crochet in Artist Alley, I don't think it's gonna happen, first of all, because I feel like once people try it, they're gonna realize it's not that easy. It's just not gonna propagate as much as like digital art would in Artist Alley. But I have seen people at like smaller shows buy my patterns and then sell the flowers, which is fine. They also will like take aspects of my display and like my setup. And it's like, okay, well, technically it's allowed. Oh, then what's the difference? Or like,
Mm.
something doesn't feel right about that, right? But it's hard to draw a line for where that.
With your explanation in terms of, I guess, like recreating, like even though they actually made that product, but then they're recreating a design, I think in my head it's kind of like tracing like someone's work. Like, when you hear about like, oh yeah, they're just
It's kind of like
tracing.
AI art
Yeah.
stuff. Right? There's a lot of craft fairs and like makers markets, but I just don't know if Artist Alley exactly is the right space for that kind of
Mm.
product.
So I've seen your post regarding this on socials, but would love to hear it on the pod. What are your thoughts on
Mm.
the Temu AliExpress crochet resellers?
Honestly, I went on like a 3 month grind of just like researching, contacting conventions, and like posting on social media. Like I made like reels and to raise awareness of all of it. It was so bad for my mental state. Like every time I got into a con, I would look up every single vendor to see if they're going to be there. Honestly, it's up to the people that run AA and exhibitors to keep an eye out for that. I literally not a single time when I messaged a convention and told them that there was going to be like it's not dropshipper, I guess, it's like a reseller there. And there was even one person that I saw, people had previously gone up to them and asked them if they were Made with April. It's like, oh, my friend told me to get something from Made with April for me at a con. They sell crochet flowers. Is that you? And they told them that they were. And that
Oh.
really like set something off in me. I was like, all right, this is
Yeah.
war. This is it. I found all of their listings online, compiled them in like a Google Doc, sent them to like the convention staff. What is it, like the Artist Alley Peep staff? Nothing happened. I've just gotten to the point that I'm kind of just like, okay, well, you know what? It's gonna happen. It's gonna be there. I'm just gonna do my best to like come up with new designs and make fan art type stuff that they can not order
Yeah.
from China.
I can imagine that's so frustrating. I can't believe they pretended to be you. That's really fucked up. What the heck?
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. I don't know.
I suppose you answered this with how you're going to combat it, but for crochet focused vendors who actually hand make their products, what would you recommend they do to combat the rise of resellers?
I post on social media. I try to show my process. I try to show like materials. I list like my patterns, and all of that helps to make me like a more credible source and show and prove that I did it. I wish Artist Alley would just be like, it's the same like to combat AI art. If you could just be like, hey, can you send me like a video of you making it?
Yeah.
And then like this would not be a problem. But I can also see how that's so hard for them to go through every application if that's the case. I try not to let it get to you too much mentally. I'm hoping it's just a phase.
There's a few major cons now that are starting to require process photos. I know there's another con besides Fanime.
Excellent.
I don't remember who else does it, but like some of them are starting to do that in order to combat like tracers and AI art. But I think that's mostly for prints. There's another con that required that, but they only did it for print artists, which I'm like, I can easily be doing that with like pins. Like I think they need to require that for like every type of like product and not necessarily just prints.
AA is growing at such a fast pace that the people that run it aren't really growing at like the same rate. They're like trying to fix problems that like we don't even know about or
So you've recently announced that you're pregnant. Congratulations.
yes, thank you.
Yay. How many months are you right now?
I am 5-ish months
Oh
right
my
now.
gosh.
If I stand up,
Wow.
there's
Oh my goodness. That's so exciting.
there's the child.
Oh my gosh. When I saw you at ALA, I was like, oh yeah, she's sitting. I'm like, how did I not notice? And then when I was watching your ALA vlog, I'm like, oh, you can kind of see it. Like, I think there's like one part where you like stepped out and I'm like, oh, pregnant.
Yeah, yeah. Most of my clothes are like big sweaters and things like that anyway. Most people don't see anything. That was the first time I've ever like sat down for a con.
Oh.
I always have like six buckets in front of me, so I just
Mm.
stand behind it. I'm like approaching the point where it's like getting difficult for me to stand for that many hours.
If I knew, I could have brought you my, what is it? I have like a chair that's like high up. So you're like at eye
Oh,
level while standing, but you're sitting. Has the way you operated your business changed in any way due to your pregnancy? At least even with like conventions or running your crochet business?
I don't know if I just like knew subconsciously or something, but like right before it happened, had already been moving towards doing the yarn and like trying to make more patterns and like make more of like a passive income thing because Artist Alley, even before all this, was kind of just burning me out anyway. I remember maybe halfway through the year last year, like I had like 1 month where I had a couple cons and I was like, oh, this is really
Mm.
hard. This is like really exhausting and the traveling is like really hard on me and I don't know why. Everyone else does it and they make it seem so easy and like, oh, I've talked to people that have done like 30 shows or like something crazy like that. And like I did so many by the end of last year and then I go back and I've done like 12. I think I already knew that no matter what, I just wasn't going to be able to sustain that. So I started thinking about different ways to make income.
Have you made any plans for maternity leave and how are you preparing for that?
I'm pretty lucky that I'm pretty much doing what I would be doing if I had to take maternity leave from like the hospital or anything. Like I would just be at home on the couch crocheting anyway. There are a couple cons later in this year that I am planning to go for maybe an exhibitor table or share an exhibitor table with someone instead of Artist Alley. It's different for all of them. I know a lot of cons are moving towards non-proxy. If I'm not able to attend Artist Alley, I'm not allowed to sell at Artist Alley. I'm slowly trying to make the move maybe towards exhibitors, at least for a little while, to see how that goes, to train a friend to help me sell there, and hopefully it doesn't impact sales too much, because I feel like as someone who does a lot of social media, my personal presence can increase sales. I mean, I'm not gonna bring like a newborn
Oh no.
baby to a con.
Yeah, it's good that you're slowly transitioning or looking to transition into exhibitor hall because that's something that I would like to do. Besides the aspect of if you need a proxy for whatever reason, you're able to do that there versus Artist Alley. There's also that rebooking aspect
Hmm.
for most, if not a majority of conventions where you can basically guarantee yourself a convention another year from now versus Artist Alley, you don't even know if you'll get in. And also, like, since most of your stuff, like, even if there is fan art, because I was like, what's the legality with fan art with like crochet goods? I guess it also counts, but I'm like, if I look at your flowers, like, let's be honest, like for a lot of like the Genshin stuff, I would not have noticed.
I feel like Genshin is pretty chill. Like
Oh yeah,
it's
right.
for me, I pick and choose. I have seen people on Etsy. I know Etsy's like the worst case. They're like super strict about that kind of thing. They'll have a lot of like Disney crochet
Mhm.
type thing. I think Snoopy also is a big one that have gotten taken down, even though it's like a crocheted version of the product. So I try to avoid like I really want to make that the flower from Tangled, the one that
Oh
like glows,
yeah.
but it's just an area that it's not worth the
Mm.
risk to approach it. I've slowly gotten a little bit more bold and like named my stuff exactly
Oh
what
my
it is on
gosh.
my website. At cons, I feel like it's different enough that it's not a problem.
So now we are moving to our speed round set of questions slash miscellaneous. But hypothetically, if you were
Mm.
invited to a panel with Artist Alley staff and they asked you for suggestions on how to improve the Artist Alley con experience, what would you suggest?
They ask for work in progress, like a photo or a video or like steps or something, because there's so many people. I don't know, it's hard to say because it's Artist Alley versus vendors sometimes too. The people that end up selling can be vetted a little bit more.
Especially for a big convention. Or I understand that for a lot of con staff, they're usually volunteers and they're doing this on top of a 9 to 5, if not multiple jobs. So this isn't really their priority. But, just some kind of like work in progress photo or video, it's not a big thing to ask, especially for juried applications.
You don't even have to check it until like the last step. Like you can do everything normally, and then like whether you do lottery or jury or whatever, and then the people that you pick, okay, now let's open that picture and just double check really quick or that video.
If anything, if for whatever reason they don't check, but then they get a notice from another person reporting that maybe this person is reselling or selling trace goods, now they have
Mhm.
something to check. Do you prefer first come first serve lottery or juried apps and why?
Okay, I have never lost first come first serve.
Wow.
I have 100%
Wow.
win rate. I think
Yeah.
ALA, Otakon, and then actually I think that's it.
That's still, those are two good
But I'm two for
cons.
two.
Yeah. That is, you're the first person to say first come,
So
first serve.
I think technically the answer should be juried.
I mean, there's no
But
right answer.
ultimately, juried creates the best case scenario. Not just artists, but like consumers, like people who attend the con. I love it when they sort by
Mm.
category because I get a little bit of an advantage. But also, it's like you don't have everyone selling the exact same thing. There's not like 90% of artists selling Genshin art.
I know you did say, I think, I don't know if it was your ALA vlog or a previous video where you said that you do want to slow down on Artist
Hmm.
Alley. But if you could, what's a dream con you'd like to vent at?
I guess Anime Expo. I didn't get in this year, but it was fine because I'm gonna be like
Oh,
birthing a
yeah.
child at the same time. So that's usually the, I don't know, like the Harvard of conventions. I think it's honestly just for its
Mm.
reputation.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people want to try it at least once just to say they've done it. Because it's a different con
Yeah.
experience. When it comes to Artist Alley, what do you invest in and what are you cheap about?
Oh, I'm cheap about anything that I can be cheap about. I invest in, I guess, anything that can help save me
Mm.
time I want to invest in, but I'm also just such a cheapo that I think that's what cost me a bit of my mental health. Sometimes you can spend 45 minutes doing something instead of paying like 50
Mm.
bucks, but you can only do that so many times before you're like, okay, I need to save my sanity.
I feel like from
A little bit of
someone
everything.
outside of your business, I feel like you invest in the experience of like your products, like the way you, the experience of like wrapping things that people have bought.
Mm.
And then it's like, oh yeah, like I'm receiving it as if I'm receiving a bouquet of flowers. What is your controversial Artist Alley opinion, if you have one?
I think it would be the thing about how crocheters should have their own designs. I think the same way about people who 3D print stuff.
Yeah.
Any kind of maker type thing like that. Like if you are going to be selling something, it should be something of your original design.
Not to knock anyone off, but it's like not another Bulbasaur 3D printed planter.
Yeah.
It's like I've seen sometimes I see the same exact ones. It's like if you're gonna make one, make it look different. Like don't make it look like the exact
Hmm.
same.
Hmm.
I have my own, so I
They'll
yeah.
even have like they just print it in like the one co solid color and they don't even like paint it or
Yes.
anything. And it's like,
It's the
did you
geometric
try?
kind where it's not even like actual Bulbasaur. It's just
Yeah.
like geometric Bulbasaur. I can say that because I bought one, but it's just funny. I have one in my room right now. Oh, would you identify as an introvert, extrovert, or ambivert?
Oh, I'm definitely introvert. I'm so introvert. I like all of my extroverted energy is on social media and then I don't have anything else. And then all my other time, I'm just at home talking with
That's
my
true.
dogs. Like that's it.
I have to say that too. I think a lot of people think that I'm very outgoing or extroverted, but that's because that's how I present at cons and social media and vlogs. All of that energy goes there. Introversion just at home. Like, I don't really talk to anyone. What is your most popular product?
Right now, it is probably the Silent Princess from Zelda.
Mm,
And then my least popular product, there's a lot of them. There's just like a lot of little flowers that I made
okay.
like a couple times and then I stopped making.
Oh, I see, I see. Like for the little flowers, is it because they're mostly for like filler if they're making a bouquet, or it's just like people just don't purchase them individually?
I think sometimes like I'll come up with designs. Okay, there's like from Genshin, there's a Lumido spell. It's basically the design is pretty complicated, but because it's like in this shape, and then most of the complicated stuff is like the stuff that sits right here. I put a lot of effort into making it match the
Mm-hmm.
picture, but you can't really see it. The price, it matches the effort, but not really the
Mm.
look of it. Sometimes it's just like not a fan art flower, and it's just like a regular flower, and just nobody's ever heard of it.
What has been your biggest money mistake with your business and why?
I think I ordered too much
Oh,
yarn.
oh, okay.
I think I spent a lot of money on yarn. I took
Mm,
pre-orders, but to be honest, I didn't really pre-order. I had already just
mm,
ordered it all, and then I took pre-orders afterwards and was just like, as like a, oh, you'll get the first one to be sent
mhm.
out or whatever. I didn't actually use that to judge my how much to order, which is what you're supposed to do. I mean, it's not really that big of a deal because I'm gonna use it anyway. I didn't really think about the logistics of dealing with boxes of yarn. I just thought about the yarn arriving into my room
Mm.
onto my shelf.
That's fair. I feel like I do that sometimes where it's like, oh, just pre-order now because the time that it takes to get the pre-order payment, it could already be in production. And then you don't realize like, wow, this is a
Yeah,
lot.
it was frustrating because it took so much longer than I thought, so I got impatient and I was just like, It'll be fine. It'll save me money anyway because it's not like a product. Like I can actually put it to
Mhm.
use.
What is your biggest business insecurity?
It used to be, I guess, the resellers and all of that. Like I would feel like, oh, people are going to think I'm not credible or I'm not genuine or they're going to not believe me when I say I can make all this. I used to post a lot more process videos and things like that to try and combat it. But to be honest, they take so much effort and I'm so slow when I have to think about, am I in frame? Is this interesting? What should I make for the camera? Can they see what I'm doing from this angle? So I try to just do like short little reels one time now to show that I'm still making it. But it was a big insecurity for me when I started. I am like fast at what I do and I've had like a lot of practice, but it still kind of irks me when people are like, oh, how do we know that you actually made all of that?
When did you first feel successful with your business, and what does that word mean to you?
It was in my first couple months of trying craft fairs. I did one local night market that was really popular, and it was also right before some kind of holiday. I can't remember, maybe Father's Day actually. At that point, every time I went to an event, the profit that I made, I would be like, oh, I made X number of hours of
Mm.
work at this event because I would just be comparing it to my job. And I think at that event, I made my whole 2 week paycheck
Oh, wow.
in like 6 hours or something. And I was just like, oh my God, I can very easily make this amount of product in 2 weeks. So it would be equivalent to the job that I did like 5 years of school for.
That's definitely the best feeling, is when you're able to equate like running your own business with your previous job. And it's kind of crazy because
Mm.
everything that you're working on in your business is for yourself and not for an employer.
I still do it. Like sometimes whenever I calculate like how much money I make or I try to quantify it differently, I always think like, oh, I made one paycheck or I made like this many hours of work at my previous job.
Again, so as someone who is always curious about how crochet shops manage to produce enough product before con, I've learned a lot from this. Where can our audience find you?
You can find me on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Made with April. That's MADE with April. You can go to my online site at www.madewithapril.com. And I have all my flowers. I have pre-made bouquets. I've got yarn and crochet patterns available as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you again for joining us, Tina. Learned so much. And thank you to everyone listening in.
Thanks for having me.
We will see you all in the next episode. Bye.